Hello, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us for another wonderful program brought to us by Women's Political Collaborative, aka Joyce McDaniel. We are so happy to have Sarah Lee and Larry Woods tonight to share with us their summer reads, like their top picks for the summer, which is so exciting because obviously, if you're on here, you love to read, and I do too. So I love to get recommendations on great books. So thank you, Sarah Lee and Terry, for being here this evening with us. I also want to thank Judge Allegra Walker and Judge Anna Escobar. I know you ladies are busy in the thick of your campaigning, but you've taken the time to be here with us this evening, and we really appreciate your support. And along with board members that are present and everyone else, it is your support that helps us continue this programming, that helps us bring this information to the community, and we appreciate that support. So thank you very much. If you have yet to become a member, it's not too late. It's never too late. Feel free to go to our website at WPCTN.com and sign up to become a member so you don't miss out on any of these wonderful opportunities, and you get discounts and or free admission to them as well. So we would love to have you join us to support the organization, to support what we do. We collaborate with other organizations as it relates to watching legislation that's going on that affects families, women, children, and things of that nature, advocating for things, coming together to try to get some legislation knocked out. And so we do quite a bit in addition to our programming that really serves the community. So we would appreciate your continued effort and support. So that being said, I am going to turn it over to Sarah Lee and Terry Woods because I'm just really excited to see what reads they have for us tonight.
So you guys are welcome to write things down, but I just emailed a list to Joyce McDaniel. So she's going to email that list to you all. If you just want to pour yourself your favorite beverage, unless you're driving, and sit back and relax.
Is this a list of secret Santas or a list of books we like?
It's whatever Joyce wants to do.
A list of books we like.
So I get to go first because I'm not going to give Larry the chance. 2 books. This one just hit #1. The New York Times bestseller. Every year I buy Ellen Hildebrand's book that comes out about Nantucket because I live in Nashville and I want to travel in my head, to New England. And this one is really poignant, sweet, sad, funny. The heroine dies, I can tell you this, right in the first 10 pages. Her name's Vivi Howe. She's a best-selling author who writes books about Nantucket. And she goes to the afterlife and has 3 nudges that she can give to change the course of her children's lives. Plus, we don't know who killed her until the end, who hit her while she was jogging until the end of the book. So there's some mystery there, but there's wonderful, beautiful food and beautiful scenery and sunsets. And Larry's like, just shoot me now. But every year I go to wherever I am when her books came out. And this year it was Parnassus. When I had my 2 grandsons for a week, I went into Parnassus and bought that for myself. The other thing that I read, and it's funny because these are both in the top 10 bestsellers. Has anybody read this, The Other Black Girl? Oh my goodness. Have you read this, Stephanie? Have you read this yet? Oh, I don't know. Well, I had heard all of the buzz.
I'm sorry, I was trying to mute myself. Yeah, I have. I have a book club with the Juvenile Detention Center, the kids in juvenile. A couple friends and I, we go down there and we provide them books each month. But anyhow, we have a relationship with a publisher that gives us books. And so the publisher, that's with that publisher, and they suggested that book for us. So yeah.
I'm glad. Yeah. I learned a lot, but there's a publishing house in New York, and Nella Rogers, the heroine, is working there, and she's the only Black girl that's seen in the office, and they hire another Black girl named Hazel May McCall. So there's a lot of bonding between the 2 of them, but is that a good or a bad thing? So I was like, it's really good. So this is going to really take off. I think it's already hit the top 10 but I think you're going to hear a whole lot of buzz. You
Yeah.
try to top that.
All right, I'm gonna top that by following the rules. I know the rules because she told me the rules before we started yesterday, getting ready, that we would start with our favorite book of the year. Unfortunately, I can't show it to you because I've already loaned it out to somebody. It came out about 6 months ago. It's by Walter Isaacson, who writes great biographies in the last 30, 35 years. And this biography is called The Code Breaker, the code being DNA. And the code breaker scientist is Dr. Jennifer Doudna, who won the Nobel Prize for her scientific discoveries about the tool to use to edit our genes in DNA, a tool called CRISPR, which is also a big, big company on the stock market these days because it shares the name. Fabulous story of this young woman growing up sort of as an outsider in Hawaii, getting a scholarship, University of California, Berkeley, and other institutions like that, becoming good enough that they gave her her own lab, and she discovers this gene editing, through genius and hard work and hiring the right people and having the right staff. And it's very interesting to see the competition among scientists. It was very clear reading the book that there was a French group and a Swedish group and one person in China and a couple of other people at MIT and Harvard competing with her as to who's going to be the first one to discover this CRISPR method for editing our genes. And yeah, the competition got pretty bloodthirsty at times. And then they'd all get together and cooperate the next day or the next week. So it was a real eye-opener for me to see that. Sort of made me think about lawyers, how we'll go into court and fight like dogs against each other, and then the next day we'll have breakfast, coffee, whatever together and socialize. Science is sort of the same way, I guess. Other thing I was told to do, which I'll try to do here, is to talk about who's really popular right now. I tend to have 5 or 10 favorite authors, and I want every book they write so I can read it as soon as it comes out, kind of thing. I'm always on the prowl for a new author because I have too much time. I read too much, and I run through these favorites. I want new favorites. So I'm going to talk about a couple of those tonight, but I thought I'd start with today's issue, or we got it today, of Publishers Weekly, the in-house trade journal for book people that talk not only about books coming out this month and next month, but also gives you the absolute up-to-date hot list, top 20 books selling in America that are fiction. I'm not going to give you the titles. I'm just going to run through how many of our authors that we've all heard of for 10 and 20 years. Ellen Hildebrandt, Sarah Lee was just talking about. John Grisham, Nora Roberts, Matt Haig, Andy Ware, Kristen Hanna. I mean, these people have been on the bestseller list for at least 10 or 15 years. James Patterson for at least 20 years. Jennifer Weiner, David Baldacci, another 15-year. Who else? Jeff Scherer, who's been on there at least for 30 years off and on. Danielle Steele. They've all got books this week on the top 20 best-selling list. That's in hardback. If you go to paperback, it's almost the same list. You could add Lee Child, another James Patterson, Heather Graham, Debbie McComber. She's got 3 books on the top 20 best-selling paper books in America. It doesn't change that much, is what I'm trying to say. It's hard for new authors to break in, and that's my next book I want to talk about. Not a new author. And once again, I don't have the book this time because it hadn't come out yet. It comes out next month. I'm not sure I can get that up there enough to see it. It's James Lee Burke. I know our 2 judges probably get tired of crime novels. They hear too much about that in court probably. I'm sort of the same way, but my reaction is I want more. I teach constitutional criminal law at TSU for the last 48 years. I try criminal cases, etc. And James Lee Burke is the best crime writer alive. Yeah, Nevada bar is awfully good. And yes, Michael Connelly's chasing him just a foot or 2 behind him in the race every year. But James Lee Burke's absolutely the best. His next book comes out next month, Another Kind of Eden. All his other books are set in southern Louisiana and in the wilds of Montana. This one's set in Colorado in the 1960s. And it's all about a cult group and drugs and problems. And he denies that it's autobiographical, but he denies it with a big grin. so I'm not sure.
You want to hold? Okay.
All right.
So not bestsellers, but should be. This is going to be one of my best books of the year. It was, I think, the June pick of the First Editions Club from Parnassus. I joined that when I could start reading more, which was when we closed our bookstore. And so every month I get a book, whether I want to read it or not, that they tell me I should read, which is a good thing. The Great Circle is a novel. It is a saga, 600 pages, but I had to Google to make sure that Marion Graves wasn't a real person. She's trying to fly from the equator. The equator starts in 1909 and goes up through 2014. And you wonder why some of the stories are in there, but it all comes together at the end. There's a whole lot of sex in this book that I'm like, I don't know if that was necessary or not, but
Hey.
anyway, the other book is Hamnet, just out in paperback.
No sex.
Yeah, there is, because Mrs. Shakespeare, whose name in this book is Agnes, they never mention Will Shakespeare's name in the book. Stratford-on-Avon, and Hamnet is their son in real life who dies. And out of that comes the play Hamlet. And it's Shakespeare's wife's story. And it's hard, but having been through a pandemic like we have, you understand why you have the stuff going on, with people with medicine and science.
Okay, still my theme that the best books to be reading are crime books. You're going to hear a lot about mysteries and crime from me tonight. Stacey Abrams, whom we hear about in politics, of course, is written her first non-romance crime mystery type book. It's all about a young woman, a law clerk for a justice on the Supreme Court, and the case that's getting ready to come up when the justice has a disabling physical attack, and she's now handling his papers, handling everything for him, and learning things she shouldn't be learning or that might endanger her. It's a thriller. Sort of like, if you like John Grisham, you'll like this Stacey Abrams book, While Justice Sleeps. And along the same line, my next best rated mystery, Widespread Panic by James Ellroy. If you liked LA Confidential, the book is even better than the great movie of 15, 20 years ago. Ellroy, who lived here in Nashville for a couple of years, has essentially written a criminal history of Los Angeles, starting in the 1930s up through.
Kathleen's going to like that.
Yes,
Our
true.
neighbor, Kathleen, who loves her some Los Angeles.
This one's set in the 1930s, and like LA Confidential, it's all about corrupt cops, corrupt lawyers, corrupt people, and who's the worst of them all, and therefore we'll see survival of the fittest. Yeah, there are good guys, but it's not the traditional kind of you meet the hero in the first chapter. You have to wade through all the despair and corruption in Los Angeles. And historically, Ellroy says, look, I'm writing this fiction, but it all really happened. And I think he's right.
I think Larry reads a lot of nonfiction for pleasure, and I have to admit, in summer, I read a whole lot of brain candy. I can't tell you what I've read, but it's taken me out of myself. Speaking of which, this is coming out next month. It's called Rock the Boat by Beck Dory Smith. She worked in the Obama White House. She wrote a memoir called From the Corner of the Oval about her experience there. This is her first attempt at fiction, and it's a lot of fun. A woman who thinks this guy's going to propose to her at a hot spot in Manhattan, you find this out right away, gets dumped, and she goes home to Sea Point, New Jersey. I mean, oh, Horace, when you're a hot shot, and she's a hot shot and then she's not. She goes to New Jersey and she connects with someone that she was friends with who's a handyman. And it's just a great, fun read. Another book, this is Cynthia Dupree Sweeney, who wrote The Nest. It was a big book a couple of years ago. This is her new book, and it's really navel gazing at its best, is what I call this. It's where Flora falls in love with Julian, and they have years together, wonderful marriage. until she's cleaning out his stuff, Larry. And she finds a wedding ring of theirs, their original wedding ring that her husband told her he lost. Well, so things, you know, there's a whole lot of navel gazing and layers of relationships. So it's good escapism if you're in that kind of mood.
If you want escapism, here's my first non-crime book, Andy Weir's new book. This is the guy that wrote The Martian of a few years ago and the movie. His latest came out this month, Project Hail Mary. He's escaping from the solar system. And just like in The Martian, if you read it, remember what made that book great was there was a new puzzle every chapter in The Martian that either our Martian protagonist, astronaut, solved or died. And this is exactly the same novel. It's just got different characters, different setting, a different problem, but it's very much the same kind of theme and fast moving sort of intellectual puzzles, plural, that you found in The Martian. I really recommend. I just read this last week. I thought the ending was a little, well, not great, but hey, he's doing a lot better than I can. He's getting books like this published. It's a fun read. Scary at times, but a fun read. Sad for the most part is my next one, The Sweetness of Water by Nathan Harris. It's a first novel. I've found a new author that I like.
It's Oprah. It's
Yeah,
Oprah's pick.
yeah,
for
no
Jack's
question,
company. Yeah.
no question. It's historical fiction, which is not my genre usually. It's the end of the Civil War. The
Which you
enslaved, yes, the end of the enslaved people have just been freed. And different from the macroeconomic view I take of that of, well, what did the 14th and 13th Amendment mean? And how did they implement voting? And, you know, the federal troops being withdrawn in the corrupt presidential deal in 1876. This is ground level. This is John Smith, or whoever the character's name is, has just been freed, is no longer an enslaved people. How's he going to get any money? How's he going to find a job? How's he going to find a meal to eat today, tomorrow, next week? Yeah, this is a really critical day-to-day kind of problems for the formerly enslaved population. None of the whites in this small town are going to help them. That changes a little bit as the book goes on and we get into gender issues, which make the white privilege hatred of the newly freed people even worse. Yeah, it's a gripping novel about identity issues, gender issues, and what the Juneteenth kind of end of enslavement really meant in 1865.
And could that be on the Pulitzer list?
Yes.
Anyway, Nashville lady Oprah picked it for hers. I loved Homegoing, and I may butcher this author's name, from Huntsville, Alabama, Gossi. This is again another one I got from, I would have bought this anyway, but I got it through my subscription of First Editions. It's my signed first edition. I have to hide it from Larry.
Yes, you
It's
do.
really, really, really good about a woman who's working on her PhD, gifting, at Stanford Medical School. She's like 7 years into the program, and she's trying to figure out why, she's doing research why people overdose, because her brother died of Oxycontin overdose when he's a high school athlete. And her mother's depressed, of course. So she's doing this research and trying to figure out what the genetics, how things bounce around, you know, why this happens to some people. Plus, there's a lot of pull in her church. And she has a strong religious background too. So if you've read anything about this author, I see where Elaine Boyd, my friend, has just started that, you know, her backstory. And if you hadn't read Homegoing, put that at the top of your list. It is so good. So it's awesome. You can go.
I just found two new mystery writers that I think are great. First, Paul Duran. This is last year's book, One Last Lie. Last month, I picked up this book and the next one, House of Secrets, by Mike Lawson. I'd never read books by either one of these folks, and they're great. And best of all, they've each written about a dozen or 15 books in this series over the last 10 or 12 years. Paul Duran writes about a game warden in Maine In other words, if you like C.J. Box's Mysteries out
Nevada
in
Bar.
Wyoming, or Nevada Bar's Mysteries at all the national parks, this is the same kind of setting, except it's typically in the parks and rural areas of Maine. And our protagonist, our hero here, is the young up-and-coming, series now a dozen years old, but he's still sort of young and up-and-coming, new police officer that they call a game warden, and it's about murders and family quarrels that result in bloodshed in Maine. And this one, House Secrets by Mike Lawson. Our hero in this one is a full-time federal employee who works for the House of Representatives. So House is typically in all the titles. And the Speaker of the House is always calling him in and saying, I'm not going to put anything in writing, but here's what I want you to do. I think member of Congress so-and-so is a crook, go find out. Or I think member of Congress so-and-so is being blackmailed, go find out. It's an interesting setting in that sense. You get 10% politics, not real politics, but the play of interaction of politics, and these questionable activities that might be crimes and might not be. He's written a dozen of them. They're wonderful, brain candy, entertainment.
I love Susan Elia McNeil. You all have met her. She wrote Mr. Churchill's Secret. We had her on for one of the Zoom book clubs. If you like smart protagonists, Maggie Hope is her protagonist, is very smart. She starts out as Mr. Churchill's secretary. She's a math genius. She becomes a spy. This time she's in Hollywood. And if you get a chance to follow this author, this comes out in July, she's doing hilarious stuff. She had a picture of Betty Davis in All About Eve holding this book in her arms. So it's just fun. But I really, really, really like her almost as much as I do Louise Penny, whose new book is coming out this fall. And in honor of my friend Kathleen, The Women of Chateau Lafayette. This is a saga of three women, starting with the wife of Lafayette and their chateau in 1774. Then it goes to World War I, and a New York socialite who works hard for the war effort during the First World War and up through World War II, with an orphan who doesn't know where she comes from, whose life is at stake. So it's a good page turner.
Rabbits. There's a podcast of the same name by this same author on the internet that's very popular. And this book's sort of a standalone. You don't need to have seen any of the podcasts. This is all about sort of a computer alternate reality game that everybody in the country is playing, because you win a lot of money if you win the contest to be the best player of the month or of the year. And the rumor, the common belief on the street is that really the CIA or NSA or one of the other spy agencies created this game to see who wins or does well so they can recruit them as spies. The rumor talk on the street also is all the previous national winners have disappeared. Maybe they're just dead. If you like the Dan Brown kind of book, the Da Vinci Code, this is very much like that. Inner conspiracies, you're never quite sure what's true and when the author is just misleading you. Or if you like Stephen King, and this year's latest, which is called Later, came out 3 months ago and was really short. I want it to be 1,000 pages, Stephen, come on. If you like Stephen King, try this. The Book of Accidents by Chuck Wendig. It comes out next month. It's a family abuse, family trauma story. The theme's really, what is the nature of memory? When I remember what it was like when I was growing up and how I was mistreated or treated well, or my sibling was treated well and I wasn't, am I really remembering it right? Have I been influenced by how I remember that today? Ultimately, it's a horror story. It's a Stephen King kind of story. Wendig's not as good as Stephen King, but then who is? It's fun if you like horror stories.
Miss Park is called the Poet Laureate of Brooklyn. She's gotten a lot of, I'm not going to try to pronounce her name because I'll kill it, but she's gotten a lot of national buzz with her poetry. Angel and Hannah is a modern day lyrical interpretation of Romeo and Juliet. It's all poetry. It's all new urban language. And Angel is Puerto Rican and Hannah is Korean. So it's a really cool what's happening right now story. And here's something else. If you like Indian stuff set in India, A Passage North is also a great story about Sri Lanka. Am I saying that right? The 30-year
Used to be
war.
Ceylon, a lot easier to pronounce.
Right. And a man whose mother's dying, and a lot of generational stories if you want to immerse yourself in into India. Ooh, there's Lynn Ingram. Hi, Lynn.
A little different for me. 1, 2, 3 by Lance Frankel. If you like Barbara Kingsolver, if you like Richard Russo, and Russo is one of my favorites. Yeah, I like both of them, and I like this author because they're all really, really good storytellers. And the story here is the Mitchell sisters, who are triplets, and they're teenagers, or at least there's a lot of back talk, remembering when they were teenagers, as the story's told. You know, they're the same, but they're different. They go to high school, orientation at high school, and one of the stupid, well, I shouldn't say stupid, a lot of principals believe in this kind of thing. One of the stupid contests is, all right, everybody take a Post-it note, write down 2 words that describe you and paste them on your shoulders. So one sister of the triplets writes down bored and boring. Yeah, that's one of the triplets I like. Another one writes down yellow and yellow, don't ask. And the final sister, the triplet, writes down perspicacious and immured. Yeah, they really are different in a lot of ways, but then this new guy moves down to high school, and all the action sort of and fears and hopes that are revolving around his relationship with everybody else. It's a really good story. It's warm, it's compassionate, and there's some twists and turns to keep it interesting. And The Council of Animals by Nick MacDonald. If you like George Orwell's Animal Farm, if you like Brooks, I can't remember his first name, who wrote the young adult series Freddie the Pig. I'm sure all of you were reading that last month. Yeah, I read it in 4th grade, but they were good in 4th grade. This is very much like Animal Farm. It's a convention of animals after the great calamities basically wiped out humanity, and all the animals who didn't get affected at all are now meeting to discuss and debate and decide, are we going to help the remaining humans who survived, or are we just going to eat them? So it's a philosophical kind of fiction book where there are only 7 votes: a cat, a dog, a crow.
The cat should get 2 votes.
A horse, a bear, and a baboon. And the first vote's 3-3 with 1 abstention of whether to eat the humans or help them. Yeah, it's interesting philosophy. I think Animal Farm's a lot better than this particular version, but again, it's like Stephen King. Who else is as good as George Orwell? It's well worth the 1-hour read it'll take you. It's a small book, and it raises some very interesting developments.
I'm surprised I got my hands on this before Larry. Clark and Division by Edgar Award winner, mystery winner, Naomi Hirara. And this is the story of a family who's interned. They're Japanese Americans who are interned in California during World War II. And what happens when they get out? One of the sisters goes on to Chicago. That's where they're going to start their lives over. And she dies under suspicious circumstances. So it's a good mystery.
I lived at Clark and Division for 2 years in law school. Can't believe anybody could afford it. Fortunately, the law school was paying my rent.
Okay. And
a great distance. It was where all the fun was. Rush Street, all the nightclubs.
Here's another mystery series that's set in the Mormon country, and it's about the Mormon culture. This is the second, The Prodigal Daughter by Harrison. And this time there is an abused teenager. And what's the church going to do about that? And a little more sadness, but the resolution involved.
Razor Blade Tears by S.A. Cosby. If you like James Baldwin, again, He's not as good as Baldwin, but he's talking about the same themes, and it's awfully good. This is the fictional version. I'm gonna give you the nonfiction version of the same book in a few minutes. Here we've got an African-American man who's an ex-felon. He served 15 years in prison. And the police come to his door to tell him that his son and his son's husband have been murdered. Both fathers set out to uncover, solve the crime. The police aren't that interested, aren't doing much. Both fathers are basically motivated by revenge. We want to take care of whoever killed our children. So in that sense, it's a thriller, not the kind of philosophy that James Baldwin wrote about, but it's the same kind of themes of disenfranchisement, lack of power, lack of respect, ill treatment of minorities, and good read, solid read. My other one, Velvet Was the Night by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. Very similar book, except this is set in Mexico City, and it's all about your neighbor disappears. And you're going to try to look into it, and you get wound up in the middle of political protest movements that are illegal, that are criminal. And I'm not sure that's accurate, but at least the official police are going to arrest you if you're in these protests, whether it's criminal or not. A hitman shows up. If you like Lee Child, it's that kind of book. There's no Reacher character really, but it's a Lee Child, Dennis Lehane kind of book. If you enjoy their mysteries, you'll definitely like this one.
Okay, this is something a little weird. If you want something weird, Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaughey. So these sisters, two sisters, the Flynn sisters, have to leave Alaska because of things that they've done or been accused of. And they go to Scotland to introduce wolves back into that country. And I never thought about that as a job. Someone's murdered. People are blaming the wolves, but the wolves really do it. It's pretty good. I mean, you know, it's takes me out of Nashville. I read this woman's first book years ago when it came out, a couple of years ago when it came out, called Tangerine. It's out in paperback now. I got it because of the cover and liked it. Well, this story is by Christine Mangan. She's the author, called Palace of the Drowned, and her protagonist is a wonderful writer until she isn't. So she goes to Venice, and she's there when there's a big flood in 1966, and who some of the characters are, some of the weird people that show up. So it definitely is good summer escapism.
Here's the nonfiction version of my last book I was talking about, Chasing Me to My Grave, an artist's memoir of the Jim Crow South by Winfred Ruber, as told to Aaron Kelly. He's growing up in Cuthbert, Georgia. If any of you have ever been there, you know it's a very small town in Georgia. And back in the late 40s, 1950s, when the author here was a child, it was even smaller. It was a classic white racist town where everybody from the sheriff, who was the highest authority figure in town, to all the other officials were desperately, violently racist. When the NAACP and the local chapter offices sued to enforce the right to vote for African Americans, they won the lawsuit in federal court. In the same week the decision was announced, every African American officer of the NAACP in Cuthbert was fired from their job, including the author, his father, and couldn't get rehired. I mean, it was that kind of America, which existed all across the South and a lot of the rest of the country not very long ago. And this is his story of how he rebelled against that, went to civil rights marches in the 50s, and went joyriding in a car. He and a friend who just marched in a protest steal a car and are immediately chased by the police and caught. He's sentenced, I forget what he's sentenced to. He serves 7 years on chain gang at the end of the 1950s and early 1960s. He finally meets a woman who, you know, helps him rebuild his life, encourages him to engage in drawings and artwork. His art has been exhibited at Yale University, the major studios in New York. It's a heartwarming story, ultimately, but very brutal, and it's a very accurate portrayal of what it was like in the South in those days.
I see, time's getting away from us, and we have some more good nonfiction books to get to.
Talk less. Okay.
All
I
right.
heard you.
A little more brain candy, Nancy Mitford, because I love the Mitford sisters, fictionalized account of her working at the Haywood bookstore during and after World War II in London, and the bookshop of Second Chances, Small Coastal Town. These are just my summer brain candy reads. There's also a book, I'm going to do this fast. There's also a book called Beach Read. Emily Henry's becoming really big with these. These are the kind of stuff, that's kind of book you put it. Two authors live next to each other. She's a fluff writer. He's serious. They live next to each other for the summer. This one I just started, and it's a fictionalized account of a woman who goes to work for Playboy in the resort, thinking she's going to better herself in 1981. And it pushes off. I pushed all my feminist buttons. I thought, I don't know. So I've just started this, but she becomes a really well-to-do curator of the museum in Palm Springs, right? Yeah, Palm Springs, California. So it's a look back at her life. And I just got the Mary Alice Monroe new book, and she's always about summer.
And if you want a job in Washington, if your ambition right now is 5 years from now to be a high-ranking federal appointee, here's the book you need to be reading. It's The Inside Dope on Our Vice President, Kamala's Way by Dan Moraine. Dan Moraine was the political reporter for the Los Angeles Times for 25 years. So he tracked Kamala Harris's political career from the time she, grew up in Canada, went to Howard University, moved back to California, ran for office, held 2 or 3 different offices. And the great thing about this book for a political addict like me is he actually names people. The day the Senate vacancy occurred in California, and Kamala Harris was going to meet on Saturday morning with her team, her insiders, to decide if she'd run for it or not, he tells you exactly who they are by name, what they do, how you can trace them and find them. If you want to know who the inside people are from California for the last 20 years for Kamala Harris, this is the book to read. And of course, it's a great American success story.
So it's like Hamilton. You want to be in the room where it happened.
Yes, that's exactly right. Great new book about Nashville. I'll take you there, Exploring Nashville's Social Justice Sites by Professor LaRotha Williams Jr. and Amy Thurber. 101 different landmarks in Nashville that were important in the civil rights movement, both the old civil rights movement and the modern civil rights movement, and in the gay lesbian movement, and in several other social and political movements. Maps, photographs, color photographs. Vanderbilt University Press did a great job on this book. Professor Williams and Professor Thurber worked hard. It's really interesting. Half these landmarks you're going to know, and then there are going to be 30 or 40 of them. I suspect, just like me, they're going to be new or surprising to you.
Go ahead.
I'm going to say a lot about this because Joyce says we're going to do an interview of this author in August, and I'll interview him. I've emailed with him. The Outlier, The Unfinished Presidency of Jimmy Carter. It's sort of like the Kamala Harris book I was just talking about. This is 800 pages of the 4 years of the Carter administration and a couple of chapters leading up to it. You find out, who really was the last one Carter talked to before decisions were made, why some of the bad decisions got made. I guess that depends on your point of view, whether they're bad or not. Why the good decisions got made, like who's ever heard of the Iowa caucus? Nobody except Hamilton Jordan and Jimmy Carter in 1975. Fascinating portrayal, nonfiction of the Carter presidency.
You want to do another one?
Sure.
Okay.
Lots.
He's in nonfiction.
Nonfiction. Again, a Nashville connection. Ethel Rosenberg, An American Tragedy by Ann Seba. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were executed by us, by the American government in 1953 for having given atomic secrets to the Russians. There's been a 70-year fight, not only back then, but right up through today, about whether they're really guilty or not, and whether they should have gotten the death penalty for it. I guess I have to say, even though I don't like the admission, that Julius Rosenberg really did give atomic secrets to the Russians. Why did I say that? The Verona papers, which are the secret KGB Russian military paper documents in Moscow that became available to scholars when Gorbachev took over and the Soviet Union dissolved in the 1990s. Yeah, lots of Russian documents basically identifying Julius Rosenberg as a spy for the Russians. He wasn't getting paid. It was strictly political philosophy. But what's missing in the Verona papers in Moscow is any reference to Ethel Rosenberg, which is a point this author is making in 20 different ways, that she wasn't really guilty of anything other than being a supportive wife who loved her husband. Dispute about that, but, and the Nashville connection is after they're convicted, after all the appeals fail, just like in death penalty cases today, at the last minute, a new set of lawyers file a new petition for the Supreme Court. The lawyer in the case was Spike Farmer, a corporate lawyer here in Nashville. Got the opportunity to talk to his daughter about this one day a year or two ago. Farmer's petition lost on a 5-4 vote at the last minute, the day before the execution in 1953. Fascinating history of all that. And if you like The Wild by Cheryl Strayed, remember the woman who was trying to find her life and solve her problems by hiking the Pacific Crest Trail?
Reese Witherspoon.
Reese Witherspoon movie, great movie. If you liked it, this is interesting. This is The Sunset Route by Carrot Quinn. She's growing up living homeless in Alaska. She sets out to find herself. She hikes the same trail. This book's about her riding the rails, jumping into freight trains across Western America, freezing at 60 miles per hour in an open boxcar on the train, how she survived all that and how it transformed her life. It's a great, great read.
So I love women biographies. There's a new biography that I just got today. Lady Bird Johnson, Hiding in Plain Sight, because I'm curious about her. This book has gotten a lot of good buzz, so that's on my nonfiction list. And this is one of the best books I've read this year. The Lady First by Amy Greenberg. This is the story of President Polk's wife, who lived in Nashville, Murfreesboro, Columbia. It's very, very interesting to see. She came from money, how she manipulated people. And I love this author. She pulls no punches, you know, when you know, people that owned slaves talk about what family members they are and blah, blah, blah. Well, this author uncovers how harsh that the Polks were with the people they owned and what they did with breaking up families. It is interesting too, because Sarah Polk could manipulate the military's people on both sides. You know, people were afraid to touch her. So she had a lot of political savvy, but warts and all, if you like that kind of biography.
Very controversial book next, Philip Roth, by an author that I won't name, because since this book came out a couple of months ago, 6 weeks ago, he's had multiple accusations against him for mistreatment, sexual harassment, etc. I don't know whether they're true or not. None of us do. We'll find out, I'm sure. But if you're a Philip Roth fan, and I am a fan of most of his novels, this is a treasure. It's his high school, college, early years, who his friends were, what his interactions were, not all of them admirable by any means, and how they relate to what he's written over the years. It's a great Philip Roth literature treasure. Or Paradise, if I can not drop this, by Lizzie Johnson. This is the history of Paradise, California, and the California Camp Fire. Worst fire in their history or in many, many years. How this one small town survived. It's a great narrative history, day by day, of what happened, the heroism of the people fighting the fire, tragedy of the people that live there. Very, very interesting.
This one is, if you want something uplifting, The Ride of Her Life has just come out. It's the true story of spunk and kindness. Elizabeth Letts has written some best-selling books about horses. And this is a story about a woman and her horse who traveled across the country before the interstate. So it's like 54 to 56. The Ride of Her Life. It's a good gift book. And the other book that I got Larry for Father's Day, but I stole it, the In Praise of Walking by Shane O'Mara, because I walk for my exercise. But it's really cool about things that are going on with the earth and the axis of the earth and what else is going on while you're walking. So those are two more inspirational nonfiction.
Back to crime stuff. It's nonfiction mostly. The Ultimate Evil by Maury Terry, with an introduction by Mr. Zeman, who's done the series on Netflix about this book. This is all about David Berkowitz, the son of Sam murderer in New York. And the theme is he had help. There were co-conspirators that were never investigated, never prosecuted. So they go through the criminal investigation files, which are basically open records today, and keep raising questions about why wasn't this followed up? Why wasn't that followed up? And eventually the author concludes, and I'm not sure whether I really believe it or think it's accurate, but it's interesting. The author identifies a blood cult in New York City who's heavy into drugs, wanting people murdered, political enemies, etc., and accuses them of fueling Berkowitz violence and insane violence and cooperating with him. Or if you want a more serious look at crime in our society, Blood, Powder, and Residue by Beth Beckey, published by Princeton.
Let me curl up with that tonight.
This is CSI, except instead of the fake CSI that we get on television and the movies, she goes through and details how crime labs really work and how they can be more effective, and spends a lot of time talking about, I think accurately, the disagreement, the disputes between our legal system and our scientific methodology system. The law doesn't define terms the same way scientists do. And that creates a lot of conflict when you want a criminalist or a scientist or a crime expert to testify in court. Conflict that the lawyers, of course, are going to fight about since they've got different goals.
This is another Oprah book, just came out, Somebody's Daughter by Ashley Ford, and you've probably seen her being interviewed about crime and prisons. This is her story. She's been in BuzzFeed and the Times and Vogue. It's about why her father is incarcerated, what that means with the chaos that when she found out what he's really incarcerated for, what her grandmother tells her. She's assaulted by a young man that she likes growing up. So she's very honest. It's painful and powerful. And another book that's just come out is a biography about a woman and husband trying to adopt a baby called Stranger Care. And they're trying to go through foster care to adopt a child.
If you like The Time Traveler's Wife, or if you like time travel stories, here's the nonfiction version. The Janus Point by Professor, what is your name? Julian Barber. He's professor of physics at Oxford. It doesn't get more highbrow or high level in physics than that. He's all about time and Einstein and quantum physics view of time. And he makes the point over and over with example after example that generally we don't understand time. We think time only flows toward the future. No, time moves both directions at the same time, backwards and forwards. He's not making it up. He gives you a little bit of math to document it, but he realizes people like me are not going to be able to follow the math. So instead, he explains it. If you've got interest in time travel and all the recent last 15 years discoveries of our huge new telescopes and what they mean for the origin of the universe and what they mean with how our scientists and our individuals treat time, this is the book for you. And my last book.
Okay.
All right. I don't have the book. This is the New York Times 4 days ago. It's a write-up on a new book called American Canon. It's American with an O-N at the end. I'm not sure how she pronounces it. It's close. An unexpected U.S. history in 13 books. The author, last name McHugh, the author, Jess McHugh, takes 13 popular books in our history and examines why they became important, why they became popular, how they helped shape our culture. And the 13 choices that she says are the most popular through our 200 odd year history are interesting. The Old Farmer's Almanac, Webster's Dictionary, Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, Emily Post's Guide to Etiquette, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends, etc., and Betty Crocker's Picture Cookbook. And she explains in pretty convincing terms, reading this review, how very important these particular books have been in shaping our identity. And because of their wild popularity and enduring popularity down through the generations, they really do focus what we're about as a nation, as a community, what we've omitted and overlooked. It's a very interesting take on American history and literature.
We both got things in our stacks to read. You can go, again, Joyce will be sending out the email, but I have a stack of things from Parnassus First Editions Club, which you can see on our handout, or you can go to their website, short stories, etc. The publisher sent us Jonathan Franzen, if you like the corrections. His new book is 600 pages, which will be out in October. And Elizabeth Strout, who I love, has a new book coming out.
We love her because we had a dinner reservation, eat dinner with her one night, Southern Festival book, and she fell and broke her ankle.
She was in
and
pain.
She came anyway.
Right. We were like, it doesn't matter, but she ended up having a good time with us because we were the fun table, of course. But A William is coming out. It's a continuation of some of her characters. So that's a good book to look for this fall. And I printed some stuff. My favorite author, Louise Penny's new book is coming out, The Madness of Crowds, in August. The Dark Hours, Larry and I will fight over or buy 2 books by Michael Conley. It's Harry Bosch and the New Woman character is coming out in November. False Witness by Karen Slaughter, who writes
she's
really
great. Karen Slaughter's right up there with James Lee Burke and Michael Conley about crime writers.
Tough. She is not a cozy by any means. No. She's I introduced her one year at the Festival of Books. Liked her, but she scared me, but she was really good. She's coming out next month. John Sanford, John Grisham, and John Conley all have, a lot of people, have books coming out, so you can be watching for those. We've done a lot of talking. Someone asked when we read.
No. The question I saw was, how do you find the time to read this many books? And my answer is real simple. It's called insomnia in the middle of the night. And recently, my answer's evolved into pandemic. A lot of time on my hands. Can't go to court, can't, etc. And I guess my third indulgence is I'm old. You can tell the color of my hair, and therefore I'm the senior lawyer in my law firm. So it's easy for me to go to my office, shut the door, and say to the assistant, I don't want to be interrupted. I've got an important legal matter to research, and prop my feet up and get out a crime fiction book and start reading it.
Then if you're really smart, you'll walk by and see Larry napping. There've been pictures taken. Since we closed the bookstore, I usually try between 2 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon to read. Read for a couple of hours Sunday afternoons. Depends on how the Titans are doing, so sometimes I have the Titans on mute and I'm reading. So I'll set aside some time to reward myself. And there are times, I started the Ellen Hildebrand book Sunday, and I was just out of it yesterday because I wanted to finish it, and it was worthwhile. So I'm at the point in time that I can do that, or I can stay up. We both have book lights, so we can read or
and
Kindle.
we both read at the dinner table. So
right, there are no manners. We've taught the grandsons that. So people sit and read. We don't care. So are there any questions? I know Joyce is going to ask us to wind up soon. Stephanie, what else do we do? You're muted.
Well, I think that's a great question. Does anybody have any questions or comments or any other reads that maybe somebody else has that they want to share with us on here as well?
Larry got a thank you from a judge.
So
I need all the help I can get.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think my video's gone out, but I just picked up and actually I'm out of town. But when I got on the plane, I started reading The Lost Apothecary,
Mhm.
which is
That's you, yeah.
phenomenal. It's absolutely. I mean, it's 300, 400 page book. About I think it's around
Fun.
300, closer to 300. I've almost finished it in between on the plane.
I know. I wish Attica Locke would write a new book. We all.
I read the book you told me to read
got
last
another one
week.
for you. She's way up there. I love her. Thank you,
she's-
Elaine Boyd.
She's the one about the African American Texas
Ranger
state
and the
Texas
lawyer.
Ranger.
I still
Right,
like Pleasantville the
Right.
best.
She's great.
Yes, she is.
Oh, wow. Well, wonderful. Well, I just want to thank you guys again, Sarah Lee and Larry, for being with us tonight and giving us. I had no idea you would have such an exhaustive list of books because I just don't know how you read them all. But I guess now we know you read at the
It's
dinner
a, it's
table.
a sickness.
Thank you to everybody that's saying thank you. It's fun. Like I said, Joyce has got the list, and we love to have your suggestions.
I
and-
will send out the list the first of the week. I get back the end of this week. I'll send out the first of the week with a link to this video so you all can hear if you want to re-listen to it, along with the list of their books.
Great. And Joyce has got our contact information. So
Yeah, and
Feel
if you discover a really good
We
new
wanna know.
detective mystery crime author, please email us.
or escape it. It just depends on the mood I'm in. I'm more Agatha Christie, and he's, how much violence can you put?
I'm for Agatha being the victim, and we'll go from there.
Thank you all so much.
Thank-
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Night.